Floridians of Perry's Brigade, comprised of the 2nd, 5th, and 8th Florida Infantry, fought here with great honor as members of Anderson's Division of Hill's Corps and participated in the heaviest fighting of July 2nd and 3rd, 1863. The brigade suffered 445 casualties of the 700 men present for duty. Like all Floridians who participated in the Civil War, they fought with courage and devotion to the ideals in which they believed. By their noble example of bravery and endurance, they enabled us to meet with confidence any sacrifice which confronts us as Americans. Hello, and welcome back to my channel, Civil War Reports. I am your War of the Rebellion reporter, Brian Thomas Kopak, and today I'm once again in front of the Florida State Monument here at Gettysburg National Military Park. And the last time I was here, I brought some potentially positive news about Confederate monuments in the state of Florida. Unfortunately, Senate Bill 1096 was defeated, but hopefully they will try again. Today, I'm not as hopeful for a positive outcome, but I'm going to talk to you today about the city of Jacksonville, Florida. And once again, I want to thank my coworker Matthew, who seems to be relentlessly searching the internet for stories about Confederate monuments here in the year 2023 for me to report to you. He also got me the information for the second half of this video regarding Arlington National Cemetery, which I reported about in episode 14. So today's episode about what's going on in Jacksonville was reported in the New York Post newspaper out of New York City. And so let's get into it. Let's talk about what's happening down in Jacksonville, Florida. Newly elected mayor of Jacksonville, Florida, her name is Donna Deegan, a self-described progressive Democrat, has raised over $500,000 for the removal of a Confederate monument in Springfield Park. Okay, the monument in question was erected in 1915 and is dedicated to Confederate women who lost loved ones during the war. The monument in question is a 6-foot tall statue of a woman holding an open Bible with 2 children at her side. Okay? Just so we know, Jacksonville is our nation's largest city in terms of continuous land mass. So we're talking about a pretty significant city here in the United States. And this monument represents also one of the last surviving Confederate monuments in the city of Jacksonville. And on the plaque, this is a partial statement from the plaque that's associated with the monument. And it reads, quote, "Let this mute but eloquent structure speak to generations to come of a generation of the past." And here's what's sad, is that this is a monument dedicated not to soldiers, but a monument dedicated to the women and to the children who lost loved ones during the American Civil War. And that is the kind of monument that the city of Jacksonville wants to remove. In that same article from the New York Post, Mayor Deegan's spokesperson, Philip Perry, had this to say on Twitter, and I quote, "We are looking at all potential options, and Mayor Deegan remains committed to removing the Springfield Park monument," end quote. And with $500,000 in her war chest, it seems very possible that that is going to happen. I did reach out to Governor Ron DeSantis, who is a presidential candidate for the 2024 elections, and I basically had two questions for him. The first one had two parts. One was, what is his position on the removal of this monument to widows and orphans? And two, does he have any power to prevent it? And the second question was, as a presidential candidate, where does he stand on Confederate monument removal, not just in Florida, but nationwide? And needless to say, Governor DeSantis did not respond to my email. A memorial to the soldiers and sailors of the Confederacy. I now want to do a follow-up on episode 14 in regard to the Confederate section at Arlington National Cemetery. For more information on that, please go back and watch episode 14. But basically there is a section 16, that is dedicated to Confederate soldiers. There's approximately 400 Confederates buried there, and in the center is a monument dedicated to the Confederacy. Again, more information on episode 14, but that monument is slated to be taken down. And unfortunately, due to time constraints, which I'm about to mention in a few moments, I could not make it down to Arlington today to film on location. I thought that the monument here at Gettysburg National Military Park to the Confederate soldiers and sailors would make a fine backdrop. So, what's going on? Well, that monument in the center is really looking like it's going to come down. There will be a public forum, a virtual public forum, beginning on August 23rd and going to 11:59 p.m. on September 2nd. And apparently you can access this forum through the Arlington National Cemetery website. I encourage everybody who is a lover of Civil War history to go on and make some comment, because I'm seeing a snowball effect here. First, it started off with Confederate generals and Confederate slaveholders, to now they want to take down monuments to widows and children, and a monument in a national cemetery that was really decided upon by people who lived through the Civil War. Thought it would be a good idea to bring about national healing, national unity, and unfortunately what I'm seeing today is more and more division, more and more animosity being created in an effort to please one group of people. We're unfortunately offending another group of people, and vice versa. And this is a cemetery. It's supposed to be a final resting place. Let these soldiers rest. And keep in mind, I mentioned this in episode 14, that monument was designed by a Jewish American sculptor who actually fought for the Confederacy. So maybe in some ways there's some anti-Semitism here in terms of wanting to take this monument down. I did reach out to former president and current presidential candidate Donald Trump for comment, but like everybody else, I received no comment. So please, do what you can. Let's keep American history alive. And I do intend to keep this channel apolitical. That is really the goal, to just tell about Civil War history and to promote all aspects of Civil War history, Northern, Southern, and what I call the third side, that of the Black Americans who took part in the Civil War in some capacity or another. But I do make this promise to you. Next year, during the presidential campaign, as the field starts to narrow in terms of presidential candidates, I do intend to reach out to all of the front runners to see what their position is on Confederate monuments, and I'll report it back to you. Once again, back in front of the Bryan House here at the Gettysburg National Military Park. And as I mentioned in episode 12, which was the first episode I did in this series about Confederate monuments, I was here at the Bryan House to talk about the plight of this family. They were a black family. They were renting the land. They were doing some farming here, and they fled the Gettysburg area as the Confederate Army was moving in. And I forget which episode, but a viewer posted a comment that said we should basically take the Confederate monuments, melt them down, and erect a monument for the black Americans that suffered during the Confederate invasion of Pennsylvania. And I don't know if this person said it sarcastically or trying to get under my skin, but I did respond with a serious response. And my response was that, with the exception of course, melting down Confederate monuments, I absolutely love the idea of a monument being placed somewhere in Gettysburg, whether on the battlefield or in the town, dedicated to what happened to those black families, because yes, some of them were forced into slavery and taken down south after the battle was over. And that is an untold side of the Gettysburg campaign. And so if this person was saying it sarcastically, all I'm going to say is I'm 100% in favor of that. Unfortunately, due to working a full-time job that requires overtime from time to time, raising a 9-year-old daughter, and researching for this channel, I simply just don't have the time to do that legwork. However, I'm going to challenge the woke community who seems to want to take down these Confederate monuments all over the place. And as I mentioned, this snowball is getting bigger. It's not going to stop. I challenge you to do just that. Do the legwork. Erect a monument for those families in memory of them. And tell that side of the story. Start telling that, what I call the third side of the Civil War. It shouldn't be too difficult for them. They've proven that they can destroy, that they have negative energy towards Civil War and Civil War history. Turn that negative into a positive. Stop destroying and start creating. Start erecting monuments, because I fear the way things are going, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, that people are going to show up here to Gettysburg National Military Park in a generation or two, and you'll see, yes, lots of Union monuments and Union markers, and nothing to represent the other side. Nothing to represent the Confederacy. So you'll see a bunch of monuments dedicated to people who stood here in defense against who? And what were the Union fighting for? What was the other side that we no longer know about? What were they fighting for? And that's what's upsetting to me as a historian. This channel, and I'll say it again, is about Civil War history. The preservation, the accurate, as best I can, telling of what happened during the American Civil War, past, and unfortunately the war that's going on now, present. Unfortunately, at the moment, Confederate monuments are in the crosshairs, and that scares me that we won't have them around to help educate people about the American Civil War. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again, there's absolutely nothing wrong if there's a statue of General Lee to put a plaque or something next to it that says, okay, some of us feel the war was about slavery, and this man owned slaves. Okay, that's an accurate telling that some people do feel that way. And yes, he did own slaves. Okay? And there's nothing stopping people who, if that monument goes up, from putting a monument on the other side that says, well, if too many, the war was about states' rights. But the bottom line is, it's the opinion of this channel. Let's stop the nonsense with the Confederate monuments, and let's start really telling the third side of that Civil War, the story about the black American. Okay, it needs to be preserved for this generation, future generations of Americans to come. For Civil War Reports, I am your War of the Rebellion reporter, Brian Thomas Kopak. And if you like what you saw today, please hit the subscribe button. Give a thumbs up. Also, notify your friends. Let them know about this channel and ask them to subscribe as well. If you like, you may leave a question or a comment below, and perhaps I will answer your question in a future episode of Civil War Reports. Until next time, please keep the history alive.